Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat and welcome po sa isa na namang episode ng online series ni Inang Pamantasan kung saan ang pagkatuto ay walang hanggan. Ito ang PNU Talks. Ako nga pala si Dharielyn R. Soreño at ako ang inyong Learning from Home buddy sa episode na ito. Bago tayo tuluyang magsimula, i-comment ang inyong mga katanungan at mga kuro-kuro tungkol sa ating episode ngayong araw at huwag kalimutang i-like at i-share ang episode natin. So before we formally start with our topic for today, for this episode, let me first tell you a little bit about myself. So again, my name is Dharielyn R. Soreño, and I am a graduate of Bachelor in Physical and Health Education from Batch 2019. I have been a faculty member of Colegio San Agustin, Makati, where I used to handle the school's swimming club. Also, currently, right now, I am working as a MAPE teacher at Manuel Roxas High School in Quezon City. So in today's episode, we will be discussing physical education in a post-COVID world. So as we transition and continue with the new normal, we will be looking at some of the most effective ways to deliver lesson in physical education. So bago po tayo magsimula sa mga ways on how to deliver physical education in the post-COVID time, let's take a look back at the things that happened in the past. So in March 12, 2020, former President Rodrigo Duterte announced the suspension of all travel by land, sea, and air to and from Metro Manila over the concern of an emerging virus called COVID-19. The restriction took effect in March 15, and as this was announced, it seems like our world stopped and the world temporarily closed. Work, school, and even some businesses had to stop their operation. The lockdown continued for many months, and as we lived during the pandemic, we adapted and progressed to a new way of living called New Normal. When it comes to education, in March 8, 2020, the Department of Education suspended all regional and national events. And fast forward to this year, February 7, the DepEd allows more grade levels to join progressive expansion of the face-to-face classes. Now, looking back at the first few weeks of the online learning, I am sure that all of the teachers and the students can relate on how we survived the school years by making changes in pedagogy and strategies and adapted to different learning modalities like online class, blended learning, and digital modules. We also learned to utilize social media as a way of effectively communicating with our students through Facebook, Discord, and any other modalities. So, natuto po tayong gamitin ang Facebook Messenger. Marami rin pong mga teachers na nag-aral kung paano po i-utilize ang ating Google Workspace as well as Google Meet and Zoom. So, as we transition and enter the new era of education, and sa ngayon po kasi it is starting the restrictions are starting to loosen up. So medyo lumuluwag na po tayo ng konti when it comes to COVID-19 restrictions. And as this new era of education enters, possibility of combining online learning and in-person teaching was given as an option to the teachers. So this type of learning is considered or is called the hybrid learning. So, bigyan lang po natin ng konting konkretong definition ang hybrid learning. Alam ko po na marami sa atin ang nakarinig na nito or marami rin naman po sa ating mga nanonood ngayon ang gumagawa na po nito or naka-experience na po ng hybrid learning. Especially, we are in this type of setup for almost 2 years now, or for 2 school years now. Okay, so as we transition and enter to the new era of education, a possibility of combining online learning and in-person teaching was given as an option. So alam ko po na marami po sa ating mga estudyante, sa ating mga guro na nanonood ngayon, ang nakarinig na po or nakakaranas na po kung saan pinagko-combine po ang face-to-face classes at ang online classes. So ang tawag po sa ginagawa natin ay hybrid learning. So konting definition lang po kung ano po ang hybrid learning. Ang hybrid learning po is more than just tossing half of your syllabus into a virtual classroom. Ibig sabihin po nito, hindi po natin plainly hinahati ang ating syllabus or ang MELCs, sabi nga, ginagamit po nating term sa DepEd, into two things. Hindi lang po natin siya hinahati virtually and face-to-face. So in hybrid learning po, we have to look at all of the factors and we have to look at all of the lessons that we have on our syllabus or all of the lessons that we have on MELCs. And then, we have to strategize and make a comprehensive approach of combining the best parts of face-to-face and online learning to create the ideal learning experience. So, as a physical education teacher, since this is our focus for today, how is this possible in the physical education setup? So here are some of the few strategies that physical educators can use in order to effectively communicate hybrid learning to their students. So the first one is assigning tasks for in-home completion and also for school completion. So consider assigning tasks for at home and for face-to-face in schools. For example, you can have the student practice a skill at home and then apply it during a class activity. So during the normal days po, bago yung pandemic, we used to teach a lot of sports to the students. So what we usually do is that we give them certain concepts or certain skills and then we let them practice in school. But right now, since we are trying to combine or we are trying to make it possible for both of the online teaching setup and both of the face-to-face teaching setup, ang gagawin po natin is instead of letting them practice and then doing it face-to-face sa in-person teaching, what we do is that we give the concepts to them ahead of time and then we let them practice at home. So, you have to make sure that the instruction is clear so that the students would be able to utilize their time at home when you are not with them face-to-face para po pagdating nila sa school, execution na lang po and konting correction na lang yung gagawin natin when it comes to skills and fundamentals, especially po for sports, for DATS. Next is individual physical activity in school and motor skills at home. So kagaya nga po ng sinasabi ko. So this is not relatively new for us teachers kasi ginagawa naman na po talaga natin ito even during the pandemic. So most sports that we teach it skill by skill or dinidivide po natin siya in fundamentals. So the only difference of this approach, of the hybrid learning approach, is that instead of mastering the skills in school, we assign the students to do it at home. Or, it can also be, if you know po na yung activities cannot be executed at home, then we differentiate all of the things that they need to do. It can also be activities na talagang hindi possible to execute alone. Then, we make the students do it during the face-to-face classes. So again, it all boils down on how the teacher plans and divide activities based on how it will fit the students. So here are some of the examples that some of physical activities or physical education lessons that we can do in school because it will be hard for the students to do it on their own while they are at home. So some of the activities can be dance, track and field, fitness stations, and yoga. Some of the motor skills that they can practice at home naman po, for example, you are trying to teach volleyball. You can ask them to practice skills such as underhand throwing sa bahay po nila. You can tell them to use any materials that is available in their area. For example, catching. They can also do that at home. They can ask their brothers, their sisters, their parents to help them practice. Para po, pag bumalik na sila sa school, once na nakita na kayo face-to-face, what you will do is correction na lang po and feedback when it comes to the skill itself. Next po is considering a flipped classroom. So a flipped classroom po is not a very new concept for us. We are doing this even before the pandemic. So consider a flipped classroom approach where the students first learn about the topic. So you can do the learning or the discussion of the topic itself during the Synchronous session on the online teaching. And then, once they learned about the topic at home, then they can come prepared to school and to learn more about it in class during the face-to-face classes. Okay, so basically, in the flipped classroom in physical education, you introduce the concepts to them ahead of time so that once you meet in person, then the students already have an idea or an understanding about the concept. Okay, so this is an example of a flipped classroom. So they learn first at home, and then once they go to school, they will be able to execute whatever concept that you have introduced to them. Next po is provide inclusive materials. Syempre po, when it comes to hybrid learning, hindi naman po kasi lahat ng bata ay kayang pumunta sa school. Or hindi naman po all the time ay kaya nilang pumunta sa school. For example, students who have comorbidity, students who cannot go out because they have comorbidities, then you have to provide inclusive materials for them. You have to make sure that your materials suits both online and face-to-face classes as well. Also, you have to make adjustments as a teacher in order for the hybrid learning to be effective. Because the goal of hybrid learning is yung wala pong ma-left out na bata. Not because they cannot go to school, they cannot have the concept or they cannot learn the lesson na. So, the teacher have to make sure to provide inclusive materials for the needs of their students. So, you really have to assess the needs of your student. You really have to, before you start the class, you really have to ask your student who can go to school face-to-face, who cannot go to school face-to-face. So, you will be able to plan and outline the things that you will do for the school year. Next is allow for optimal student choice and provide opportunities for students to engage. So, these are some of the mistakes that we have seen when we are doing hybrid learning. So, some of the teachers, they only provide activities that are engaging, or they sometimes neglect engaging activities when it comes to online learning, because the teacher's thinking is that makikita naman tayo sa face-to-face, then that's when I will do an engaging activity. I will just give you the concept here online, and then we'll do engaging activities once you come here face-to-face, which is wrong po in a sense, because you have to make sure, again, since this is hybrid learning, you have to make sure that both of the modalities are receiving the same energy. Okay? So, you have to provide opportunities for your students to engage. Now, let's continue talk about how to create a successful hybrid learning environment when it comes to physical education. What do you plan to accomplish with your hybrid class? That's the first question that you have to ask yourself. So that is setting goals. So you have to set your goals for this class. What do I plan to accomplish with this hybrid class? By setting long-term and short-term goals for yourself and your class, you can explain the key expectation to your students. Because again, let us backtrack a little bit. We are letting the students learn on their own when they are at home. So it is very important that the students know that the students know beforehand the expectation of the subject from them. So it is also important that you plan your lesson and you set goals for long term and for short term. Also, determine that these goals and their corresponding assessment as well. So, setting goals is not enough. Also, the assessment that comes with it should also be planned by the teacher ahead of time. And work backward to structure the rest of your course. So make sure that once you're planning, you try to take a look at all of the loopholes that you will see, all of the problems that will arise. Syempre, it is still a learning process. While setting goal, hindi mo naman makikita. You will not be able to see all of the loopholes at that very moment. So you have to make sure that you take note of all the things that you will find as you progress with the lesson or as you progress with the school year. Next is mapping out your lesson. So now that you've determined the goal of your course, now that you know the goal of your course, this is what you want to achieve, this is the expectation from the student, this is the assessments that I will give for my student, now you will give your students a map in order for them to navigate their class very well. So this is still part of setting the goals or still part of the planning process. So it can help you, or what can help you is to create a chart, a table, or a timeline, or other visual tool that you can present to your students, and you can also use for yourself to outline your course models. And also the respective activities, resources for each of the things that you've mapped out in chronological order as well. So, hindi po pwedeng labo-labo. So, you know that because most of our viewers for today are teachers or students. So, you're all very familiar of planning the things in chronological order because we cannot do it on how we want to do it. We really have to follow the milks and the things that we have to focus on for each of the period. So, again, by mapping your course visually, it will be easier for you to spot any course holes or underdeveloped activities. So you will see there in your map your assessment, your certain lesson. So in that way, you will have a visual representation of the things that will happen for the whole school year. In that way, makikita nyo po kung saan ba yung may kulang, kung saan merong parang hindi swak na activity for the online setup and for the face-to-face setup as well. Next, you have to factor in the hybrid element. So you have to make sure that you will factor in always when planning and mapping out your activities, the hybrid element. Dapat po, when they are in school, your focus is collaboration, outlining individual activity, meaning dito po kayo nagbibigay ng input kung paano po nila gagawin yung activity nila when they are at home. Because when they are at home, it is very hard for them to focus. There are a lot of hindrances, there are a lot of distractions at home. So it is important na when you see each other in school, you are giving the children or you are giving the students an outline of the things or of the things that they will finish once they are at home. Next is synchronous group activity. Make sure that even if it's an online setup, you are still making sure that they are doing collaboration with their peers and with their classmates. Next is feedback. So, kapag nagkita-kita po kayo during the face-to-face classes, make sure to check all for example, you've introduced a skill, you've introduced a fundamental skill for a certain sport, then that's when you give the children a feedback. Kasi, let's keep in mind that most of them practice in school. Hindi nyo po sila nakikita or you cannot monitor them as they practice the skill. So it is very important that you give the students feedback on what to improve on, kung ano ba yung kulang, kung meron ba silang na-miss out na steps, so that when they come home, they will be able to correct and not continue with anything that they are doing wrong. So Next is the presentation. So if you are planning to have them like practicals or something, you save it for the face-to-face classes. Next is to create and source content. So it is very important or it has been proved that contents that are made by the teachers specifically, especially if you will be using that content for online class, if makikita po ng bata na si teacher ang nasa video o si teacher mismo yung gumawa nitong content na to, it is more effective than getting videos online or than getting videos in YouTube. Okay, so I know that it is very tasky on our end, but again, let us remember that this video, for example, you do it for this school year, you can use it for the next school years as well, because yung lesson naman natin ay most likely ay hindi po nagbabago or nadadagdagan lang. So most of the resources, if you will make it your own or if you will make your own resources, then you can use it in the coming years as well. Next, give your hybrid plan a trial run. So siguro hindi naman po talagang full force na trial run, no? Just make sure that the goals that you've set, the mapping that you've made is suitable for the needs of your student. So a trial run po is optional as long as you know that you've planned and set the goals for that school year very well, and just make sure that it fits the students' needs and inclusive for all of the things that might happen, for the things that the student may request, or for the changes that the Department of Education might announce. So now let's look at the benefits of hybrid education. So number one, flexibility. So as I've mentioned a while ago nga po, no, while you are setting goals and mapping out, you cannot really see all of the loopholes, you cannot really see all of the pagkukulang that you will have for the plan that you've made. So that is what makes hybrid education flexible, kasi you can always change, you can always add to the plan that you've made initially. Next is preparation for the future. So since hybrid education is a mixture of online class and a mixture of face-to-face classes, just in case, worst case scenario, wag naman po sana our cases went up again, then you are prepared to do online classes because you are doing it with hybrid learning. Or in case naman po na the risk gets low and lower as we progress during the school year, then you are prepared for the face-to-face learning as well, because you are doing it in the hybrid education. So you are, in this kind of setup, you are like hitting two birds with one stone, because you are practicing continuously with the online platform or with the online teaching, and also you are doing face-to-face as well. Next is variability for learners, and also more time for students to learn at their own pace. So siguro that is what most important thing that the pandemic gave to the students. It is learning at their own pace, because with hybrid learning, you will be introducing concepts and then they will be doing it on their own. So it is their own interpretation, it is their own pace, it is their own way of learning, it is their own interpretation of the things or of the concept that you have introduced to them. So you give them more time to learn at their own pace, at their own space at home, something like that. Okay? Next, Matt Cotter Jacobs said the United States National School Boards Association Chief Transforming Officer, there's an opportunity here for school to get creative and shift the way students learn and the way teachers provide guidance. Because again, hybrid learning is not forcing us to implement face-to-face 100% agad-agad. and also implement online teaching 100% agad-agad. So this is a great opportunity for teachers to expand and to get creative on how they present things both face-to-face and both online. And lastly, in the end, there is no perfect modality. Continuous research and improvement is still needed to continue the education smoothly in a post-COVID world. So wala pong perfect modality, wala pong perfect way to do things. We are still continuously researching on ways on how to cater our students more effectively than we have done in the past. So the other learning modalities has loopholes as well, and we are still trying to figure out on how to do this thing or how to teach a student in the post-COVID world. At doon po nagtatapos ang episode po natin ngayon. Muli, ako po si Dharielyn R. Soreño at sumainyo po ang PNU Talks. Muli, huwag pong kakalimutang i-comment ang inyong mga kuro-kuro ukol po sa ating episode at topic sa araw na ito. Huwag nyo rin pong kakalimutang i-like and share ang mga susunod pa pong episode ng PNU Talks ni Inang Pamantasan. Again, maraming salamat po sa lahat po ng nanood.